last name is Pitzen, Pitzen.
A little boy taken. Then years later, a young man found.
He had his child who said he ran away. He said he was kidnapped.
A mountain of clues that did not make sense.
I couldn't have even imagined it. Not in my worst nightmare.
A heartbreaking mystery.
It looked like a homicide scene.
The case every cop wanted to solve.
We need some help with this.
The story every reporter wanted to cover.
The police, the families, the public, they all wanted to know what happened to this child.
Across the Mississippi, deep in the nation's heartland, sits the small river city of Clinton, Iowa. This is the hometown of a father named Jim Pitzen, a man haunted by memories of a son who looked like him.
Come on! Come get me!
A son he sees in a reoccurring dream, as clear as his old home video.
Dig in like a big boy! Come on, you gotta come closer!
Almost within reach, until Jim Pitzen wakes up.
In my whole mind, I know he's here somewhere. Where he's at is, I'm not sure.
Jim grew up in a big family and always wanted kids of his own. Then he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma.
You got sick at a young age, 21.
Yes.
Did you think you could ever have children?
No, I didn't think I was going to have any children.
Jim beat cancer, but says his doctors told him the chemotherapy would leave him sterile. So Jim went on with his life. In his early 30s, love and luck. He fell for a woman who accepted a future without children. Her name was Amy Fry.
You were attracted right away?
Yes, very, very beautiful lady.
Amy's sister Kara thought they were a good match.
My sister loved kids, but she didn't want to have them herself. She didn't think that that was in her path. Jim was a man who wasn't supposed to have kids. They enjoyed doing the same things. They enjoyed talking to each other. They just seemed in sync.
Little did Jim and Amy know that life had something and someone else in store.
She talked in her sleep. She goes, "You got to marry me. I'm pregnant." And I'm waking up. I'm like sort of awake then. The next day I go, "You got something you want to tell me?" "Why is that?" "You talk in your sleep." She goes, "Yes, I'm pregnant."
Amy was 4 months pregnant when they got married in a small outdoor ceremony. They moved from Iowa and found jobs in Aurora, Illinois, when their baby was born on October 18th, 2004. The son Jim always wanted and never thought he'd have.
A miracle baby.
I think so, yes.
They named him Timothy after Amy's brother Tim, who died at birth, adding 2 M's to Timothy to differentiate the names.
They were so happy with what this child was going to bring to them and the family they were going to have. Timothy was such a happy baby.
For a woman who said she never wanted kids, Amy seemed to blossom into a mother who loved her son more than anything.
Her relationship with Timothy was like peas in a pod. They were practically inseparable.
He adored his mom.
He adored his mom. It was the one thing that I thought, wow, Amy was meant to be a mom, and these two were meant to be together.
Timothy loved his parents, and his pets were a close second. Eddie the dog, and his cats Rex, Andy, Rita, and Moose.
Tell me about Timothy.
Very energetic, very fun-loving little boy. He was on a go-kart at 3 years old, doing donuts in the backyard, riding his bike up and down front of the house, going over to the neighbor's house, getting in trouble.
Jim and Amy taught Timothy not to go too far. After all, they'd grown up in the birthplace of those missing milk carton kids. 2 Iowa paper boys kidnapped years apart back in the 80s and never found.
You've taught your children to be polite and friendly.
Did you take precautions to protect Timothy from strangers?
Oh yeah, we told him not all strangers are bad. Police officers are your friends. Firemen are your friends. And if you have issues, don't be afraid to go up to them and tell them that something's going on.
Was he old enough to understand that information?
I believe so.
Did he know his phone number?
Yes, he knew his phone number. He knew where he lived.
You drilled that into him?
Yeah.
And he remembered?
Oh yeah. Teacher goes, he's one of the smartest kids in the class.
A half-day kindergarten class at Greenman Elementary that made identification cards for each student in case they got lost. Jim also ordered Timothy an Illinois state ID as an extra precaution. Still, stranger danger was the last thing on Jim Pitzen's mind on the morning of Wednesday, May 11th, 2011.
I had no idea about what was going to happen on that day.
Jim was 39 at the time, Amy 43, Timothy was 6. They got up early to take Timothy to school on their way to work. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary.
You dropped Timothy off 7:45?
Yeah.
Did he say anything when he jumped out of the car?
Love you, Dad. See you later. And he just hopped out and just went to the little wild run.
He was excited to go to school.
Oh, yeah.
He liked school?
Oh, yeah. He always loved school.
Then Jim dropped off Amy at her job a few blocks away and went to his office nearby. About 2.5 hours later, Jim followed his routine and went back to pick up Timothy at school. It was 10:30 a.m. What happened next in the span of 3 minutes is something Jim Pitzen relives every day.
I pulled up and I got out. His teacher goes, "What are you doing here, Mr. Pitzen?" I'm like, "Here to pick Timothy up." "Oh, he left 8:15 this morning."
8:15?
Yeah, 8:15 in the morning.
Police would later say it was closer to 8:30, still just 45 minutes after he was dropped off. School security video showed Timothy walking down the hall on his way out. Why was Timothy allowed to leave? Where did he go? And most important, who was he with?
Never want to live through that again.
It turns out sometimes strangers lurk inside the people we already know. When Jim Pitzen went to pick up his son at kindergarten in Aurora, Illinois, he was stunned to learn Timothy was already gone. There he was on security video walking toward the front entrance, just 45 minutes after Jim and his wife Amy had dropped him off. It turns out Amy had returned to the school and signed him out.
What did she say to the school when she picked him up?
They had a family emergency.
The video showed no signs of an emergency. Amy appeared calm as she waited in the lobby, even waved at her son as Timothy happily walked out with his Spider-Man backpack and grabbed her hand.
Was there any family emergency that you knew about?
No, there was no family emergency at the time.
Jim immediately called Amy's cell.
Never answered the phone.
How many times did you call?
A lot. 15, 20 times that day.
Jim rushed home and saw Amy's Ford Expedition was gone, but was relieved to find her suitcase was still there. Amy's sister Kara knew nothing of any emergency and tried to quell Jim's concerns.
Jim called me on Wednesday and said, "Have you heard from Amy? She took Tim. I don't know where they are. She's not answering my call." And I said, "I'm sure she's fine. If you've been fighting, just give her some time to cool off."
In fact, Jim said they had been fighting about a sudden girls' trip Amy had taken to the Bahamas the week before that he did not approve of.
I picked him up from the airport with him. Wasn't very happy.
What'd you say?
I didn't say anything.
We said everything.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's not the first time she had said, "I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there for a couple days and clear my head." I told Jim, "Don't worry about it. Just let her cool off."
Jim barely slept that night, and the next day, with no sign of his wife and son, he reported them missing to the Aurora police.
What did the police say?
It's only been 24 hours and he's with his mom. We'll just let it chill a little bit.
Jim couldn't chill. He searched the house for clues of his wife and son's whereabouts. His mind was spinning. Amy had a history of depression, so Jim checked the bathroom cabinet to see if she'd taken her medication.
You look inside, and what do you see?
2 full bottles of pills that haven't been opened.
To Jim, it seemed nothing was missing.
2 full bottles of pills?
Yes.
So not only did she not take her medication with her, she had not been taking it for a while.
Yes, correct.
Those meds, Wellbutrin and Lexapro, helped Amy cope with depression and some other issues from her past.
I'm scared for both of them after I found out that she didn't take her medication with her.
Are you worried she might harm Timothy?
No, she would never do anything to hurt him.
Never?
Never.
Not for 1 second did I think Timothy was in danger.
But Jim was becoming more and more concerned. He remembered the morning of the school drop-off. Amy said she suffered a bout of vertigo the day before, but still wanted to drive Timothy in her own car. Jim had insisted on driving them both.
She goes, "Don't you trust me?" I'm like, "Yeah, I trust you, but you can't walk. You're wobbly."
Amy's sister Kara has retraced every step Amy took.
Maybe 20 minutes after Amy was at work, she told them she wasn't feeling well. She walked to Timothy's school, signed him out.
No indication of vertigo on the video.
They walked home. She took her car and started driving towards Brookfield Zoo.
A zoo 32 miles away outside Chicago. But before Amy arrived, her alternator light came on, so she stopped at a repair shop near the zoo in the town of LaGrange. The mechanic was helpful. and even offered a ride.
They drove Amy and Tim to the zoo while her car was being fixed. They spent a few hours there.
At 3 p.m., about 6 hours after he was signed out of school, Amy and Timothy left the zoo and picked up the repaired SUV. But instead of driving home, Amy had other ideas.
Amy decided that her and Tim were going to go to the water park that they had been to many times. So they hopped back in the car, went to the water park, spent the night there.
The Key Lime Cove Water Park in Gurnee, Illinois, was 45 miles north of the zoo outside Chicago. Another one of Timothy's favorites. This video shows Amy and Timothy walking in the hallway. They slept here Wednesday night.
I think the next day she said, I really don't want to go home. So there's another water park in Wisconsin Dells.
The drive to the Wisconsin Dells on Thursday, day 2, was 163 miles. Credit card receipts showed she stopped on the way to buy children's clothes and toys at a Shopko in Racine, Wisconsin, around 11:30 in the morning. At 2:20 p.m., she bought gas and drinks from this quick trip off Interstate 94 in Johnson Creek.
I think that she wanted to have fun and she wanted to spend some time with Tim. And I think that she just was thinking one day to the next.
They checked in and stayed at the Dells Water Park Thursday night. On Friday, day 3, with no word from Amy, the search for the mother and young son was now ramping up.
At this point, it's clear that people have been looking for Timothy's mom.
Angeline Hartman is the media director at the Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the host of the Inside Crime podcast.
Now it's Friday morning, and Timothy and his mom have breakfast. They have room service. It's about 7:30. A couple hours later, they're seen checking out. Okay, everything seems fine.
The security video on Friday at 10:10 a.m. shows Amy and Timothy leaving the Kalahari Resort. Timothy was wearing sneakers with flashing lights.
They hit the road again, heading back to Illinois. Based on cell phone records, Amy pulled over somewhere in the Dixon, Sterling, Rock Falls area, a place her family would later learn she had secretly visited before.
She realizes lots of people are trying to get a hold of her now. She starts calling people back. The first call she makes is to police. It's a little bit after 12 o'clock, and she says, "This is Timothy's mom. I'm Amy. I'm fine."
Amy did not call her husband, but she did call his brother in Waterloo, Iowa, and he could hear a child's voice in the background. It was Timothy.
Timothy gets on the phone with his uncle. They have a little conversation. Timothy says he's fine, he's a little hungry, but he's happy.
In Angeline's podcast, Jim's brother recalled the conversation.
And I go, "Amy, what is going on?" And she's like, "Oh, I just needed a break. You know, everything's fine." And then I'll never forget this because I said, "You know, why don't you just come to Waterloo?" She goes, "What, don't you trust me? I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm not going to hurt Tim." And at the time, I believed her, you know, because why would you say something like that?
I get a call from my brother and goes, "I just heard from Amy."
When your brother says he could hear Timothy, what goes through your mind?
They're safe. They're safe. They're somewhere, but they're safe.
Relief.
Yes, a lot of relief.
Then Jim asked his brother when Amy said she was coming home with their son.
I don't know, Jim. She goes, "Timothy is mine. I'll do with him what I want."
Timothy is mine. I will do with him what I want. Was that some kind of a threat? What in the world was Amy up to? Was this road trip really as spontaneous as it seemed? Or did Amy Pitzen have a plan?
Whatever happened Friday afternoon, I believe, was the turning point for her. She, at some point, decided, I'm not going to go home.
She went to Rockford, Illinois instead. And the next morning, on Saturday, day 4, a motel housekeeper was about to make a shocking discovery.
She goes in thinking she's going to clean the room, and she finds this horrible, bloody, what looks like a crime scene. It's horrific.
A few hours later, Jim Pitzen heard a knock at his door.
Who's there?
2 detectives from the Aurora Police Department.
What goes through your mind?
Oh, they found Timothy. They found Timothy and Amy. That's what went through my mind.
The detectives asked to come inside. They had some questions for Jim.
Where were you last night? I'm like, I was home, had some beers, watched television, sleeping on the couch, waiting for Timothy and Amy to come home.
Jim says he felt they were trying to establish whether he had an alibi for the night before. And then police dropped a bombshell.
They go, "We found Amy." I'm like, "Okay, we found her deceased."
Amy Pitzen had been found dead in a motel room. But where was Timothy?
Now it's Saturday, and it's about 12 o'clock.
On day 4 of Timothy Pitzen's disappearance, this low-budget motel in Rockford, Illinois, was about to become the center of an increasingly frantic search.
The cleaning person knocks on the door, doesn't get a response.
Angeline Hartman is the media director for the Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
She goes to open the door, the chain is on. So she can see through this gap. She can see blood. It's horrible. She steps back out and she calls the police.
Police entered room 108 and found the body of Amy Pitzen. Her throat had been cut.
Veteran detectives have described it looked like a homicide scene.
But remember, there was no sign of forced entry. The room was locked from the inside. And police soon discovered Amy's left forearm had wounds as well.
Here's the thing. It's not a crime scene. It's a suicide. Amy has taken her own life, and it's a bloody mess in there.
Amy's sister Kara was in Washington State at the time. She spent the morning at the ocean and left her cell in the car. When she got back, she noticed her mom had called multiple times. She quickly called her back and got the news.
The first thing you feel is just incomprehension. Just, I don't understand. No.
Amy had gotten undressed, climbed into the tub, and apparently started her violent suicide by cutting her forearm with a box cutter. Then perhaps grew impatient with the time it was taking, got out, stood in front of the mirror, slit her throat, and collapsed on the floor. Jim says he was grieving the loss of his wife and was terrified to find out Timothy was gone.
I call my mom, hysterical. I go, you got to get here. She goes, why? I go, well, Amy killed herself and Timothy's missing. Just a terrible thing to happen.
Police asked Jim to identify the body. He took his mother with him to the morgue. She stood behind him.
She's like, that's her.
Jim moved closer. He still could not believe it.
She had a birthmark on her leg. I go, just make sure it's there and just make sure it's her. There's a lot of things go through my mind at that time. Maybe she got somebody who looked like her, or her and Timothy are out running around somewhere.
So you're still not sure? You wanted to make sure?
I was hoping it wasn't her, but it was.
It was her. But again, where was Timothy?
What do you mean Tim's not there? How could he not? Where is he? I don't understand. I just don't get it. Where could he be? You can't tell me that he's not there.
Back at the motel, there was almost no sign of Timothy. None of the toys Amy purchased on their road trip, the new clothes or toothbrush. His Spider-Man backpack was gone.
The only thing that was left with Amy was one T-shirt of his that she had bought at Brookfield Zoo. They bought matching T-shirts. And that was the only thing, which I think that was her comfort piece in the end with herself.
She wanted that Brookfield T-shirt because she'd just been to the zoo with Timothy.
She wanted one thing of his. At that point, she knew she was going to take her own life.
Amy also left her driver's license, a picture of Timothy's identification card, and a note on the desk. She even apologized to the housekeeper about the bloody mess she left to clean up. And then there was this frightening and cryptic message for her family.
The note says, I'm sorry, and I know this will be hard on all of you, but in time you'll get over it and you'll move on. That I just don't feel like I've ever belonged in the world, and I felt for a long time that I belonged with Timothy, but in the end that wasn't even enough. I need to go, and I've taken him somewhere, and he's with people who will love him and care for him, but you will never see him again.
You will never see him again. Had Amy really found someone willing to secretly adopt her son, or had she done something to Timothy she didn't want people to know about? Clearly, whatever demons Amy Pitzen was dealing with caught up with her in room 108.
Is it fair to say now there was a side to your sister you never knew?
I think I knew. I think that I believed what she presented to us. I believed that she was better than she was. I knew she was depressed. I knew she had challenges. I didn't know that it was as bad, obviously, as it was.
Did she ever try to take her life?
She did, multiple times.
She says Amy had attempted suicide twice in the past. Once before meeting Jim, Amy drove her car onto railroad tracks, then changed her mind at the last minute and checked herself into a hospital. The second time was while she was dating Jim.
We had an argument. I told her to stay with me in Ames, and she took a bunch of sleeping pills and fell off a cliff at a park.
Amy broke a bone in her back. It was in the hospital more than 2 weeks.
I remember seeing her in the hospital. I still can picture that sometimes, how much it disturbed me. And she laid passed out at the bottom of this ravine and developed hypothermia until a random, I think it was a fisherman or a hunter, found her and called 911.
She almost died.
She would have if she had not have been found.
Amy also had 3 failed marriages before she met Jim. He says he knew everything about her troubled past.
Were you concerned about divorce?
No, I wasn't concerned about divorce.
Still, Jim knew the struggles in their marriage went far beyond her recent girls' trip to the Bahamas.
We had a little episode a couple years before that when I found out she was talking and had lunch with her first ex-husband. I go, you can make the decision where you want to be. You can be either married to me or you can go back with your first ex-husband, but I'm going to get custody of Timothy.
You told her, if you go back to the other guy, you're going to get custody of Timothy.
Yes.
You were not going to give up custody of your son.
Oh, nope. No, not one little bit.
What would you do to keep custody of your son?
Pretty much anything I needed to do.
She was worried that her losing custody of Tim was a real possibility, and that was just not something that she could handle. It was not any kind of scenario that she could envision for her life of being without Tim.
She would do anything to stop that from happening.
She would have done anything to prevent losing Timothy, yes.
In the following days, 2 letters arrived in the mail. One to a friend, the other to her mom, who was desperate for any words of hope.
Just praying that he's in a loving home where people are taking good care of him and that he'll grow up into a good man.
Amy did not send Jim a letter, but he was mentioned in the note at the motel.
Did she apologize to you in her suicide note?
No, she was angry with me on the suicide note.
What did she say?
A couple of derogatory comments.
Specifically what?
Loser type things, not being nice.
She was very angry at you.
She took everything away from me that day. She made a very, very big point that I'm going to hurt you worse than you hurt me.
In her final note to her mother, Amy even said, I can't take the chance of Jim hurting Tim because of my choices. Despite the hurtful words from his wife, Jim says he was struggling with grief and sorrow.
I lost my wife. I lost my family. Just devastated that this happened or that I couldn't do anything to prevent it.
But where was Timothy? Could the answer lie in the Ford Expedition she left parked outside the motel? Were there clues about where she had been and what she had done?
I think he's here. I think that she came to a place that only she knew of.
They did find a rather concerning amount of blood in the back seat.
Amy Pitzen's violent suicide changed everything. Within hours, the disappearance of Timothy Pitzen became a national story. The FBI and Center for Missing and Exploited Children joined the search in Illinois, where police weren't sure what to think.
We have not ruled anything out.
In the parking lot of the motel where Amy died, crime scene investigators made an alarming discovery in her SUV.
They did find a rather concerning amount of blood in the back seat.
The blood was sent for analysis to see if it was Timothy's. Police also recovered soil, grass, and minerals from the tires, undercarriage, and sideboards.
We're going to take samples of those substances that were actually found on the vehicle to find out maybe if those materials are unique to certain parts of Illinois.
Experts went to work analyzing Amy's note, letters, and phone call, trying to answer the question on everyone's mind. Was Timothy really somewhere safe, as Amy had written in her note, or did something happen to him? Police did find over-the-counter children's medication in the motel room that could have been used to sedate him, either for a handoff or something more sinister.
Police did not find Amy's cell phone, but her phone pinged off a cell tower in northwest Illinois for the last time between noon and 1:30 on the day before her body was found. This may have been the last location Amy and Timothy were together. Nearly 70 investigators searched state parks, wooded locations, and remote roads along Interstate 88 and 39 through Sterling, Rock Falls, and Dixon, Illinois, where Amy made her final phone call.
Unfortunately, as every day goes by, it's worse and worse for us and the family. Every day that goes by we don't find him is a bad thing.
Amy apparently turned off and tossed her phone and iPad to cover her tracks. Roughly 7 hours later, she was seen alone on video. For the first time, there is no sign of Timothy. Amy was 55 miles from Sterling at this Sullivan's grocery store, not far from the motel where she died. Amy was now wearing a different outfit from the one seen earlier on video with Timothy. Those other clothes, brown capri pants, a light-colored top, and a pair of sandal-type shoes were never found, according to police.
So, did Amy dispose of them to conceal a crime? The analysis of the blood found in the back seat of her SUV where Timothy used to sit, they came back, and the results were not good.
That blood was tested, and it came back that it was Timothy's blood.
Jim was increasingly desperate and went on the evening news.
Please, 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 return him to his family.
We need some help with this. We still do not have any solid leads as to where Timothy may be.
I would love to solve it.
Aurora police hired world-renowned scientist Skip Palanek of Microtrace. He helped solve the Green River murders in Seattle by analyzing particles of paint. Now he focused on soil from Amy's SUV.
You looked at soil from the sideboards. Was there soil inside the vehicle as well?
Yes, there was. It was on the passenger seat.
In the back or the front?
Back.
The same seat where Timothy's blood was found. Palanek says the soil had been wet. It had been raining in the hours leading up to Amy's suicide. He says the pattern of dirt under the vehicle and bumper showed she had driven off-road.
The wheels were kind of spinning or in such a way that they were picking up the dirt and the mud and literally spattering it on the underside of the car and on the back as well.
I think he's here. I think that she came to a place that only she knew of.
Lindsay Caceres, a mother of 4 from a law enforcement family, was heartbroken by the boy on the news, hoping Timothy would be found. But in the years ahead, he wasn't. So she studied every aspect of the case.
Why have you put so much into this child that you didn't know?
Kids just do not vanish off the face of the earth.
When police released the forensic analysis from Microtrace, Caceres pored over the findings, trying to pinpoint exactly where Amy pulled off the road. This remote field near an Amish farming community by the Illinois-Iowa border is on a route Amy used to travel. And Caceres says the grass, minerals, and soil checked every box in the Microtrace report.
As you look at the report, it says mustard plants in the area. Any mustard plant here?
Yes.
Any Queen's Anne's lace here?
Yes.
Birch trees?
Yes.
Caceres even talked to Palanek and learned he discovered something else.
You found an unusual mineral?
Yes.
What's the name of it?
Anhydrite.
Anhydrite. He says the mineral was in perfect condition, meaning it was recently mined. Construction crews often spread gravel containing the mineral on the shoulder of a road they're paving. Caceres says that's another match to this location.
I believe it's this field because the road she had been on was a newer paved road, and this road was repaved months prior to the disappearance.
It is just miles from the place Amy's cell phone was last traced. And detectives say her iPass history showed she traveled to this general area earlier that year.
She took 2 trips up there within a month apart, and the family and none of her acquaintances, the people we have talked to, none of them can give us any idea as to what she would have been doing up there.
Was she meeting a person who would later take her son, or finding a remote place to dispose of a body?
He could be with a family, yes, of course. I'm not God, I don't know. But the other possibility is he is deceased. So then the other question is where is he then?
Sadly, Lindsay says she does not believe Amy's plan was to hand off her son to a loving family. Forensic psychiatrists have studied cases of what's called altruistic filicide, mothers who rationalize that murder is in the best interest of their child. But experts say these cases are extremely rare.
I believe that she backed all the way down here, and she disposed of Timothy's body. I think that what her suicide mirrored his homicide.
Casera says police told her they would search this field if she found any sign of Timothy. She even used a metal detector trying to locate the batteries in those flashing light sneakers he was wearing. She continued her search on and off for 3 years, but no luck.
The leads go cold. They don't get anything new, and eventually even news coverage starts to move on.
Phil Rogers is a veteran investigative reporter for NBC Chicago. He says the media moved on until one April day in 2019.
It was an otherwise uneventful day, and then suddenly this bombshell hits. Someone's been found in another state.
His last name is Pitzen, P-I-T-Z-E-N.
Immediately, this reshifts the focus of the entire newsroom that day. It's all hands on deck.
We're following breaking developments in the disappearance that stunned the area.
8 years after Timothy's disappearance, a chilling call to 911. 342 miles away, on the border of Ohio and Kentucky, a frantic young man said he'd been held against his will since 2011. And yes, he said his name was Timothy Pitzen.
He had his child who said he ran away. He said he was kidnapped.
We're following breaking developments in the disappearance that stunned the area.
The news broke so fast, police did not even have time to tell Jim Pitzen. His sister saw it and called immediately.
Did you see the news out here? I'm like, no.
This is a mystery which may have just taken a stunning turn.
The incredible story came from the border of Ohio and Kentucky. A frantic young man said he'd been kidnapped years ago, and his name was Timothy Pitzen. It felt like the moment in the Elizabeth Smart case back in 2003. A teenage girl feared dead, but found alive.
I thought, it's over. It's over. It's over.
Timothy has been found.
Yes, yeah.
The latest turn of events in the case began this morning when a 14-year-old boy who identified himself as Timothy Pitzen said he had just run across a bridge into Kentucky.
Some people found the young man distraught on the street and called 911.
He said he was kidnapped, and we found it. It looks like back in 2011 he was kidnapped.
Investigative reporter Phil Rogers covered the story for NBC Chicago.
We started contacting authorities in Ohio and Kentucky. We're contacting the sources we know from the original investigation here in the Chicago area.
His colleague Kate Chappell flew to the scene to talk to the people who discovered the young man, and they told a harrowing story.
He was timid, he was scared. They said, "What are you doing here? Where did you come from?" And he told them blatantly, "I'm Timothy Pitzen."
He was taken to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital to make sure he was physically okay. The emotional trauma would be another issue.
He said he'd been kidnapped. He'd been trafficked. He told them very specifically he'd been passed around, and he described these men as having tattoos.
The young man said he'd escaped from a Red Roof Inn and described his captors as white men who looked like bodybuilders, one with a spider tattoo on his neck, the other with a snake tattooed on his arm.
The story about being abused, it was heart-wrenching.
Sexually abused and trafficked for years. It was the family's worst nightmare, especially for Timothy's grandmother.
His mother left me a letter, and she said that he would be with people who would love him and take care of him.
As the world waited for DNA results to confirm his identity, police in Illinois traveled to Ohio with a series of test questions for the young man. Simple facts that had not been released to the media.
I got a phone call from the Aurora Police Department later on that night, and he goes, "Got a couple questions. You guys have a dog?" I'm like, "Yes." "Did he have a pet?" I'm like, "Yes."
Remember, Timothy loved his pets, Eddie the dog and his cats, Rita, Rex, Andy, and Moose. So police asked the young man a question and relayed his answer to Jim.
And he goes, "Well, he claims that you didn't have a dog and he didn't have a pet."
Then he declined to have his fingerprints taken. And finally, the FBI got the DNA results.
The person in question was not, in fact, Timothy Pitzen.
Breaking tonight at 10, it was all a big hoax. Police say the person who claimed he was a missing Aurora teenager was lying. If he's not Timothy Pitzen, who is he?
Brian Reaney.
Brian Reaney. He wasn't even 14. He was 23, just out of prison for burglary. His estranged brother said he was off his meds.
I'm not surprised. I mean, he's nuts. He has Asperger's, bipolar disorder, ADHD. The list goes on.
He had been watching a program on television that put the spotlight on Timothy Pitzen and became obsessed with this case and decided he wanted to be Timothy Pitzen.
Reaney eventually pleaded guilty to aggravated identity theft and went back to prison. He was sentenced to 2 years, then released to his father's custody.
What did the false hope he created do to you?
It destroyed me for a week or two. Very unhappy. Very destructive.
In what way?
Mentally. They find Timothy, yes. Then it brings you back to, like, ground level to back through therapy and deal with everything and false hope and just want my son. I mean, don't care how old he is. It's just want him.
At the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Angeline Hartman was furious.
I am pissed. I cannot be more pissed. When I heard about what happened, I was so mad because I thought, how could anybody do this to a person, let alone this family? You know, it's hard for me to talk about because I get so angry. They've been through so much, and they do not deserve this.
Angry, but still hoping Timothy was alive. The center continued to release the latest age progression photographs of what he would look like as a teenager. As the years went by, and with Angeline's support, Kara finally decided to do something she had contemplated from the very beginning.
It took me 10 years to get the courage myself to make that drive.
It was time to retrace her sister's steps on those 3 days in May 2011. Was there a clue to Timothy's whereabouts missed along the way? What she was about to find would jog her memory and strike a nerve.
It was like a light bulb went off, and I'm like, now I get it. Now I know where she went. Now I could see her steps, and I could be in her head and see what she was doing.
We'll be right back with the final chapter of what happened to Timothy Pitzen. Be sure to watch other episodes of Scene of the Crime, now available on multiple streaming platforms. He was a bright student with a promising future.
He was so smart. He'd get all his work done before anybody in the class.
Then, a sudden change in his daily routine.
He missed class.
Does that sound like your brother?
No.
A reliable son goes missing. A relentless mom goes looking.
I gotta do something. I gotta go look for him.
Then, holiday heartbreak. She was a star contestant on American Idol, an incredible singer who made it to Hollywood. Then, her mother disappeared, and this daughter went from diva to detective.
We were in the streets. Have you seen this woman? Do you know this woman? She's missing. She's our mother.
And finally, a surprise ending in the final chapter of The Missing United Executive.
We turn to breaking news this evening in Lamont.
He went missing, but they never said why.
A missing persons mystery with lots of clues and finally some answers and a stunning twist at the end.
Your reaction?
Shocked.
Where have you gone on this map?
A decade after Timothy went missing, Kara went on a mission, retracing her sister Amy's steps, all 500 miles. She drove to a place police had mentioned, but she didn't yet realize how significant it was.
So you think the answer to the mystery of what happened to Timothy is north of here?
Remember, her sister's cell phone was missing. Well, a few years after Amy's death, a couple found it. behind a grain storage building off this remote road near the border of Illinois and Iowa.
Pleasant Valley Township.
Yes,
In the middle of nowhere.
in the middle of nowhere.
As Kara pulled up, she realized this was a place she and her sister had driven by before, and that phone proved Amy had been back. The question was why?
And I'm like, now I get it. Now I know where she went. Now I could see her steps and I could be in her head and see what she was doing.
This is the crossroads.
This is the crossroads. Somewhere between Sterling and Mount Carroll, the phone calls happened.
The calls to relatives. After that, Amy's phone went dead. She apparently tossed it behind the building so she couldn't be tracked.
When she tosses the phone, do you think at that point this is a road of no return?
I think it is, yes.
She's made a final decision.
I think she's made the phone calls before they get here where we're standing, and I think that was it.
The phone calls were to say goodbye.
I think so.
Based on cell records, Amy reached out to relatives from noon to 1:30 on Friday, day 3, when Timothy talked to his uncle. He was not heard from or seen after that.
This was meticulously planned.
Yes, I believe so. I believe she went north on 78, which would take you right into Route 20. And if you turn left, that'll take you to Dubuque.
Dubuque, Iowa. Kara said this is where her family went when they were kids.
Spent a lot of time on Route 20 back and forth when we were young, visiting our grandparents, our aunt and uncle. Amy actually lived with our grandparents in Dubuque for a period of time in the early 90s. She knew people there. She met people in Iowa. I believe that whatever happened was a connection that she made there.
And you believe whatever happened was a handoff to another family?
I do.
And you think that's where Timothy met with some other family?
I do.
The more Kara drove, the more she was convinced Timothy was alive, even as she retraced her sister's next stop, 53 miles east in Winnebago, a family dollar store not far from the motel where Amy died. Here, Amy bought a pen, envelopes, and paper. Then she headed to a nearby Sullivan's grocery to pick up her favorite snack of Ritz crackers and milk. Amy stayed at the parking lot for a while.
What was she doing sitting in her car in this parking lot?
I think she was thinking about what she wanted to say.
Kara thinks she spent a few hours writing her last letters before mailing them at the post office across the street and checking into the motel. Remember, Amy had changed her clothes, but Kara says she doesn't think it was to conceal evidence of a crime. The store security video shows she was composed.
She was still looking fine. She wasn't disheveled. She was carrying herself appropriately in a public space. Nothing would make you believe that she had just done something so.
nothing points to murder from what is seen on the videos and the behavior at that time.
Correct. She looks like a normal person just going in and buying a couple things.
But what about the discovery of Timothy's blood?
They found Timothy's blood in the SUV.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not a sign of murder?
No. No, Jim was actually in the car a couple months before that when Tim had a terrible nosebleed, and he bled all over his car seat, all over the car, all over his clothes. He was prone to nosebleeds, so no.
Like gushing nosebleeds?
Yeah.
That would account for that much blood?
Yep, yep.
So you don't think the blood found in the SUV has anything to do with your sister doing anything?
Absolutely not.
Jim Pitzen confirmed the recent nosebleed.
Timothy had a really bad bloody nose. I mean, gushing blood out of his nose, like 2 washcloths full of blood.
Police did say the blood tested on the box cutter in the motel was not Timothy's. Only Amy's blood was found on the blade. As for Lindsay Caceres' theory of Timothy being buried in that field,
while I appreciate the fact that people care and they want to find the truth as well, what I would say is you don't know more than the authorities do. You don't know more than I do. You don't know more than the police does.
Jim agrees, but says he's not convinced of Kara's Iowa handoff theory. Yet says he does believe Timothy was given to someone, somewhere.
You believe someone raised him as their own son?
Yes.
What do you want for them?
I want them to know when Timothy is found and we find out who you are, there will be another knock on your door. And hopefully it's the police.
You've thought about this?
I thought about a lot of things. I know what I'm capable of, and I know if they sat this close, yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Police say a complete check of all Amy's computers, phones, and financial records showed no evidence of a secret adoption. Clearly, whatever happened was orchestrated by Amy. In many ways, this wife and sister was a stranger hiding in plain sight. A loving mother, perhaps, but one who took the secret of her son's fate to the grave.
What is the key to solving this?
One person saying, I remember this day when I seen these people with this little boy, or I remember that Amy and Timothy here, and he gave him a big hug and he went with somebody else. It's gonna be a one person, one big clue type thing's gonna solve this whole thing.
Jim still sees his son in his dreams at night, and dreams of the day he wakes up to find him.
Dig in like a big boy. Come on, you gotta come closer.
Do you envision the reunion?
Always. I've had since he was about this big. Just running up and give me a hug. And now I'd shake his hand.
While Jim waits for that moment, he keeps busy working in the garage. Timothy's old toys sit on the shelf, his go-kart nearby, and Wagon out front collecting weeds. Constant reminders of the boy who looked like his dad.
Thousands of times I visualize him standing in front of his dad.
Kara works with Angeline at the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, helping other families. Her journey continues. The road she travels is a long one. The destination, not a place, but a person, a little boy who would now be a man.
We are not done. I am not done until I can see Tim standing in front of his dad. And then I'll feel complete, like the circle is closed.
If you know anything about Timothy Pitzen's whereabouts, call the Aurora Police at 630-256-5516. The FBI reports Timothy is just one of over 300,000 missing children in the United States. Take a close look at these photos. If you have any information, call the toll-free 24-hour hotline at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at the bottom of the screen.
but now I ain't one. Switch that over, that's the down. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Saw you when